As we're all well aware, things have really heated up with China this week. I've got 4 news articles from which I'm going to point to. You can use them for references. You can take a peek around. And then there's a point at the very end that I want to make that I can't find a news story to talk about. But it's just my own thoughts, my own conclusions, and I want to share them with you. You can decide if they're valuable, if they're useful, if they'll help you with your plan of food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, and means of self-defense. We're talking about shit hitting the fan, and we're talking about China's relation to the United States of America. What is going on, why they're doing it, what the causes are, what are the downstream effects, what are the intended and unintended consequences, where does this lead? Lots of questions. So I've got a story here from SputnikNews.com. All links down below. SputnikNews.com. U.S. Treasury Department designates China as a currency manipulator. Right? Secretary of the Treasury Steve Mnuchin announced Monday that the U.S. has designated China a manipulator. See, the U.S. manipulates its currency, but the excuse or the justification for that is it's the world reserve currency. We need to make sure it's in line with what everyone else is doing and everyone gets along and we're all playing in the pool nice. But we're the adult in the pool and everyone else has to do what we say. That's kind of the United States attitude or the Federal Reserve attitude with regard to the U.S. dollar. China is no longer playing this game, along with other countries that are trying to use their own currency and setting up alternative trade systems, as well as stacking immense volumes of gold by the ton. I mean, I'd like to be able to afford to buy a single ounce. They have thousands of tons, and tons are thousands of pounds, right? Anyways, it's crazy. So, the Secretariat asserted that this amounted to Beijing's open acknowledgement of extensive experience manipulating its currency and remains prepared to do so on an ongoing basis. He was citing an August 5th statement from the People's Bank of China. The release quotes Chinese authorities as claiming to have, quote, accumulated rich experience and policy tools and will continue to innovate and enrich the control toolbox and take necessary and targeted measures against the positive feedback behavior that may occur in the foreign exchange market. That sounds like a mouthful of stuff, doesn't it? But essentially it's being translated as we're going to do what we want. Now, Mnuchin is saying, well, that's not good. That's a violation, right? And what they're saying is that Mnuchin plans to confer with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, to eliminate the unfair competitive advantage created by China's latest actions. We have seen, as a result of this currency manipulation, some massive movements in the stock market this week. We've seen massive activity in precious metals, in bonds, in currency valuation. It's had a big effect. Donald Trump tweeted, China dropped the price of their currency to an almost historic low. It's called currency manipulation. Are you listening, Federal Reserve? He's talking to Powell. This is a major violation which will greatly weaken China over time. If it weakens China, well, shouldn't we let them weaken themselves? If it strengthens China, shouldn't we do the same? I mean, it's a game. It's a high-level game that's being played with high stakes. So I'm going to move on to a Zero Hedge article. Trump slams People's Bank of China for stealing hundreds of billions of dollars with FX manipulation. Okay. It's more of the same. More Trump quote. Let's just go through it real quick. Based on the historical currency manipulation of China, it is now even more obvious to everyone that Americans are not paying for the tariffs. They are being paid for compliments of China. And the U.S. is taking in tens of billions of dollars. China has always used currency manipulation to steal our businesses and factories, hurt our jobs, depress our workers' wages, and harm our farmers' prices. Not anymore, says Trump. Right? So China's central bank has confirmed that it is indeed on saying that it is able to keep the yuan exchange rate at a reasonable and balanced level, whatever that means, right? So everyone's agreeing. Now, if they have violated a International Monetary Fund rule or a G20 rule or a whatever rule, do nations get to just stand up and scream, this is what you're doing and you have to admit it? Or is there a court process, some sort of tribunal, a conference? Do they take a vote? How do they solve their disputes? I don't know. But, you wouldn't like it if your partner stood up at a meeting in front of the world and said, hey, you're an asshole and you're a thief. That's essentially what Trump has done. He's called them thieves. He said they stole billions of dollars. They're stealing our industry, stealing our wages, stealing everything. That's a big accusation. It's not a fucking soap opera. China's a country. Their leaders are leaders of a country. Our leaders are leaders of a country. And do you just make a blanket accusations of you're a thief? I mean, not only is it an offensive term in our culture, it could be extremely offensive in their culture, and indeed, it is. Right? Let's go on to the next story. From the dailycoin.org. China is extremely angry, and now they consider the United States to be enemy number one. Right? Let me give you an example of how pissed off they are. One of the most highly respected news anchors in China, his name is Kang Hui. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Actually used an explicative, foul language, bad words, cussing, when referring to the United States during a news broadcast earlier this week. This would be like Walter Cronkite using foul language and accusing Russia, the Soviet Union. This would be like Tom Brokaw, right, using foul language and cussing, right? This is the quote from Kang Hui, their version of Walter Cronkite. Quote, speaking of the United States of America, quote, they stir up more troubles and crave the whole world to be in chaos, acting like a shit-stirring stick, he said on his 7 p.m. national news program. Right? The explicative quickly became one of the most searched phrases on Chinese social media. In a follow-up video on a social media account, Mr. Kang boasted about how he had taunted the United States. Quote, if a handful of Americans always stir up troubles, then we are sorry, he intoned. Quote, no more do we talk about certain issues. We will also target you. We will bash you till your faces are covered with mud. We will bash you till you are left speechless. Big words from a news anchor, right? But it's representative of the Chinese government's sentiment. Once again, the broadcast network called CCTV is China's state broadcast network. Remember, they're not like us. They're the media over there is directly and flagrantly and openly controlled by the government, unlike the CIA-controlled mainstream media here in the United States, which is a propaganda tool of government and the deep state. Theirs is actually open. So when CCTV news anchors say something, they're telling the people, this is what the government believes, and this is what you better believe. Right? So it became very searched for. They want to know what the hell is going on, the people of China. They're following orders too. They're doing as they're told. That's what's going on. Very interesting, right? Most Americans spend very little time thinking about relations with China. That's true. That's why I'm doing this video, so we can think about our relations with China. But in China, they are absolutely furious with us right now, and the developing situation in Hong Kong is one of the biggest reasons for that anger. Millions of people had flooded the streets of Hong Kong in recent weeks, and it appears that the Chinese have decided enough is enough. That would be the shit-stirring accusation. The White House is monitoring what senior administration official called a congregation of Chinese forces on Hong Kong's border. Right? Shit stirring. This is what's going on. We're now enemy number one to them. They're pissed at us. We've called them names. We've accused them of debasing their currency. Right? And I want to, the last news story before I get to the point that is very important that I want to bring up is, it says Zero Hedge article, New Cold War is unleashing geopolitical chaos. China reacts to U.S. offensive missiles in Asia. This is the important part of this story. Go ahead and read it if you'd like. But it's a new Cold War. We've got a new Cold War. The old Cold War was the Soviet Union post-World War II. This Cold War, that means we don't have tanks and people killing each other on a battle line. Bombing and shooting and killing and murdering and stabbing and everything else that goes along with murder. They're not doing that. The Cold War was about increasing military spending on tanks, planes, ships, increasing numbers of troops, arming them, supplying them. Right? It became the cottage industry in the United States of America. That's the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower, in his goodbye speech to the U.S., warned us of, right? But the Cold War was an arms race, which included nuclear weapons and ultimately the SDI program, Strategic Defense Initiative, also known as the Star Wars Missile Defense Program, right? It's a spending war. They tried selling us, the people, on, well, we need to defend ourselves, but it's a spending war, and we're going to defeat the empire with our spending. So now we're going to move to my point that I would like to make. We have a replacement for the Soviet Union. When we outspent the Soviet Union and they collapsed not because we won the Cold War with our better technology. We won because they ran out of money. After that, America went, what are we going to do? Well, the first thing we had was the first Gulf War. We started a war against terrorism. It didn't really become official until 9/11, and then we had the Patriot Act, and it's become a war against the people in the United States by our own government, considering us the enemy, looking at veterans as potential terrorist groups and individuals. We know who the terrorist groups and individuals are in this country. It's socialists on the left, not veterans, not the people, not taxpayers. Anyways, we replaced the Soviet Union in that Cold War with the War on Terror. And the War on Terror resulted in the spending of trillions of dollars in armaments and military gear that was blown up. It has to be replaced. What a great business to be in. I would like to sell the government television sets, and I'll be the sole supplier of television sets, and the government's job is to shoot the televisions and then replace them. I, as the television set supplier, would be in a great position to benefit from all that destruction, don't you think? Yeah, same story. Bullets, bombs, planes, jets, tanks, satellites, drones. Kill, kill, kill. That makes them their money. People are getting tired of the War on Terror. But now we have a new Cold War enemy, China. Right? The difference between now, though, and the original Cold War, the Cold War with the Soviets, is back then America wasn't broke. Right? Both China and the United States are starting this at a point where both nations are severely in debt. Debt relative to the gross domestic product, debt relative to the amount of currency, right? But it's the fear of China that they're going to try and develop. And in China, they're developing a fear of the United States. So that this is our new enemy. We get tired of our wars. We want a different enemy to try and kill and hate, right? We need some variety in our life, I guess. But this is what's happened. We now have a new Cold War coming. We have geopolitical chaos coming. Right? Shit hitting the fan, in other words. And this is very, very, very much like 1984, where you had three different regions on the world at war with each other. And if you watch the movie with, I believe it's William Hurt, if you watch the movie or read the book, you'll discover that the people were rationed. They were manipulated with news. They were controlled and mandated to exercise and perform and behave, and you had to speak a certain way. And that's where this term, oh man, that's Orwellian, right? It was George Orwell that wrote that. That's what we're getting. We're getting another continent. We're getting another geopolitical region of the planet to hate and to fight this war that we don't really see any casualties on, but it costs us everything, including our freedom and our dignity and our souls. Understand that this is what this is about. It's about manipulation and control. But the problem is that shit hitting the fan is certain to rear its head. Because domestically in our country, we have so many problems. Because they're causing us to fight in amongst ourselves as well as out in the world. Right? The only thing you and I can do is prepare food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, self-defense. Get your plan together, think about it, understand, so that as these things happen, you're not surprised. You aren't left going, what? What happened? I thought everything was fine. I thought China was our buddy. This has been in the works. It's been being planned, and they're carrying it out. Because things carry out in a natural order of progression. Right? You put some seeds in the ground, you put some water on it, sun comes up, warms the soil, eventually you get some shoots, some sprouts, some plants, and then there's the fruit. Right? They keep doing the things that are going to lead us to the fruits of war, which is chaos, loss, death, and poverty. You guys, be cool. Thank you for supporting the Prepared Mind channel, and I'll talk to you again very